Good morning, colleagues. House Bill 2004 is the first bill I am co-carrying on this venerable floor, and it is a great privilege to speak today about our state's housing stability challenges. I know we've heard this statistic many times this session, but I believe it bears repeating. 4 in 10 Oregonians rent their home. That means we have about 1.5 million people in our state who are vulnerable to unpredictable housing changes under a set of laws that currently provides for nearly unfettered unilateral tenant removal. House Bill 2004 includes 2 important policies that will provide some predictability and fairness for renters, while also protecting the rights of landlords as property owners and business people. First, the bill creates a just cause standard to protect renters from sudden no-cause evictions. Second, it returns a tool to local governments, allowing them to consider rent stabilization policies to slow down economic displacement that's happening in hot rental markets. As one of the co-chief sponsors of the bill, I would like to give you background on why I believe these moderate reforms to landlord-tenant law in Oregon are necessary for us to take action on today. I see stable housing as crucial to building successful families and communities. I've spoken on this floor about my tenure as a Milwaukee City Councilor and the difficult stories I heard of no-cause evictions or substantial rent increases that served as de facto economic evictions. These issues are a primary reason why I ran for this legislative seat. This session, we are working on many big-ticket items: transportation, budgets, healthcare, and these policy decisions do not happen in a vacuum. As we make infrastructure investments, our housing markets will be further impacted, like the rents that doubled in Milwaukee after the arrival of the Max Orange Line made it a more desirable place to live. When larger multinational real estate investment firms buy up multifamily housing complexes in Portland to the tune of $1.7 billion in 2015 alone, it is not the community or a median Portland household making $55,000 that benefits from significant rent increases. Subsequent decisions, currently allowed under state law, to issue unlimited rent increases or no-cause evictions to entire buildings impact schools, employees, and for some of us, our families and our friends. Economic factors are not firmly within our control in this building, but the policies that influence these factors are within our purview. To that end, I've had conversations over the past few months with many of you, including several of my good Republican colleagues, who I don't see as often because we occupy seats on opposite sides of this chamber. I know many of you care deeply about the housing challenges that our fellow Oregonians face. We simply may have differences of opinion on what policy tools and changes are necessary to address these issues. Last month, the House Committee on Human Services and Housing heard 6 hours of testimony from a balanced number of landlords and tenants. Over the past few weeks, several significant changes were made to the bill to make it more flexible for landlords, especially for owners of 4 units or less. The amendment no longer eliminates no-cause evictions altogether. Instead, it allows landlords to continue using no-cause evictions during the first 6 months of a tenant's occupancy. So, as we heard, if a tenant turns out to be problematic, a landlord may evict them from the unit using that process. It reduces the amount of relocation assistance required for no-cause evictions or landlord business-based cause evictions to 1 month's rent, and exempts small landlords with 4 units or less from having to pay for any relocation assistance. For landlords who live on a property with 2 or fewer units, such as a duplex, an ADU, a basement apartment, or roommates, this bill does not apply at all to them. Under House Bill 2004, a landlord will still be able to terminate a lease for common convenience reasons, now termed business reasons, including demolition of the unit, acceptance of an offer to purchase the unit, turning the unit into a landlord's or a family member's primary residence, provided others are unavailable, and safety reasons or repair reasons. Furthermore, the bill stipulates that if a local city or county wants to implement a rent stabilization program, they must provide a fair rate of return on rents for landlords, must provide a process for a landlord to petition for additional rent increases if an established rate of return is insufficient, for example, where a landlord may make investments in upgrading the unit and needs to recoup those costs, and must exempt new residential development from such a program for a period of the first 5 years of its occupancy. I know many of my good colleagues are landlords, and many have been following these proposed changes closely. Small landlords with 4 or fewer units are exempted from paying relocation expenses, but others that engage in commercial leasing must provide tenants under these no-cause or business cause reasons with 1 month's rent as moving expenses. In locations across the state with tight rental markets, this amount provides a reasonable measure of help to individuals who are being asked to move unexpectedly, perhaps against their preference. I spoke earlier about my previous service as a local elected official, and I want to come back to how that has informed my position on this bill. Conversations in this building around housing have often focused around the metro region, with Portland standing in as a proxy for all of the surrounding communities. I'd like to touch on how and why rent stabilization, returned to all local jurisdictions under this bill, matters. Local control allows policymakers to create programs that make sense in their individual communities. House Bill 2004 does not take a one-size-fits-all approach to the housing program. And I am particularly supportive of this because what works for Portland may not work for Milwaukee, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Salem, Bend, and Eugene, as well as our smaller communities in the state. Many of our communities are facing housing shortages and market pressures, but while our symptoms may appear similar at the surface, our root causes often differ. A counselor in Beaverton tells me that Washington County's problems are driven from a low vacancy rate, coupled with being the #1 place in the state that people are moving to. In Portland, on the other hand, gentrification and other pressures have already led to high rental rates. Now, whole buildings are being issued no-cause evictions in order to be converted to higher-end rentals. In Milwaukee, a formerly blue-collar community is finding itself upended as Oregon's desirability as a destination place is placing ever higher market pressures on our suburban communities. Rent stabilization is an effective tool to address displacement and should be paired with other municipal incentives, including but not limited to increasing supply of both market rate and affordable housing. For those of us who served at the local level, perhaps the memory of hours of public testimony have ebbed with time. It is still fresh in my mind, and the numerous emails we've received on this issue won't hold a candle to local civic engagement should a city or county choose to take up the issue of rent stabilization. And that's as it should be. Local public officials will need to hear from all sides in order to craft effective policies. Rent stabilization is a tool, not a weapon against landlords, that allows local jurisdictions to take a multifaceted approach to a complex problem. The colleagues who have spoken to at the local level, from Happy Valley to Lake Oswego and beyond, take their often unpaid duties seriously and will give this tool the consideration and civic process it deserves. Colleagues, these reforms are just and are measured. I urge an aye vote. Thank you. We've heard today from a number of viewpoints, and I know we've all heard from a number of constituents over the past several weeks. I want to speak briefly to a few points raised today. This bill only applies to fixed-term leases entered into or on or after the effective date. For month-to-month tenancies, it will apply to such tenancies on or after the 30th day after the effective date. But where a tenant has done nothing wrong and is current on rent, it gives them an opportunity to continue on in their homes. Further, Oregon is not alone. Even other large cities in other states with significant active multifamily construction are also experiencing housing affordability challenges. And as I close, I'd like to add my own experience in getting priced out of Portland. Over the years, my wife and I had become friends with the folks living across the street and next door to us. And when summer finally arrived every year, we'd share barbecues in our common yard. In 2012, however, when our downstairs neighbors moved out, the unit was re-rented for hundreds more than we were currently paying. In a landlord's market, I knew that they would seek to bring our month-to-month tenancy up to match. It was a hard decision, but we preemptively left to find a place within our budget and found a great rental, an absolutely terrific landlord in Milwaukee, thus setting me on a trajectory to join you today in this chamber. And the previous apartment managers did raise the rent significantly for the next tenants. There are many people who cannot voluntarily make this choice to move. It is a deep and lasting problem that crosses socioeconomic and political walks of life. Today, my son, my wife, and I have a secure and safe home which we bought last year. As homeowners, we now have the luxury of knowing that our son will grow up in our house for as long as we wish to stay there. However, there are children who don't get this chance. Their parents may be fighting as hard as they can to get ahead, but these kids won't grow up alongside the neighborhood kids the way that I, and likely you did. Their parents' financial security is tenuous, and a double hit like car trouble and a no-cause eviction may render a family homeless. Hunger advocates testified this past month that Oregon is the only state in the country where families and kids are experiencing greater hunger and food insecurity since the Great Recession. They attribute the underlying cause to the significant increase in rents statewide, while worker salaries have not seen the same double-digit increases year over year. A 72-year-old woman who lives in my district visited me in Salem this month. She and her husband have received a no-cause eviction 3 times in the last year and a half, as rents in some cases have doubled in our district. I cannot imagine the stress and anxiety this has caused her, and others like her who have also asked me for my help. Each move cuts ever deeper into their retirement and their savings. I am supportive of this bill in no small part because I am deeply concerned about the ability of senior citizens on fixed incomes to stay in their homes. Under the guise of no-cause evicting problem tenants, these methods of eviction have been misused and must be curtailed. I heard just last night of a colleague's friend who received an eviction notice after requesting repairs to her unit. She is 8 months pregnant. It is high time that we distinguish in law evictions for those tenants that are truly detrimental and dangerous to the property and to adjacent tenants, and those that simply want a safe place to call home. Where 1 in 5 Oregonians are struggling to have enough food to eat, I believe these measures of reform to landlord-tenant law will make sure that our communities are stable and neighbors continue to thrive. Colleagues, I again urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk will open the voting system. Representative Lively, how do you vote? Lively votes aye. House Bill 2004A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. No applause, please. Thank you. Chair requests unanimous consent that the rules be suspended, that the House bills remaining on today's third reading calendar be carried over to their proper place on the Wednesday, April 5th, 2017 calendar. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Final reading memorials and resolutions. Chair requests unanimous consent that the rules be suspended, that the measures remaining on today's final reading calendar be carried over to their proper place on the Wednesday, April 5th, 2017 calendar. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Bills, reports, and other business lying on the table. First reading of Senate bills.
Senate Bill 846 relating to restraint of youth in custodial circumstances. Senate Bill 890 relating to privileged city information disclosed to elected city auditor and declaring an emergency.
Bills read first time are passed to the Speaker's desk for referral. Second reading of Senate bills. Third reading of Senate bills. Chair requests unanimous consent that the rules be suspended and that the Senate bills remaining on today's third reading calendar be carried over to their proper place on the Wednesday, April 5th, 2017 calendar. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Other business of the House. Orders of the day have been completed. Announcements. Representative Mike McLean.
Colleagues, our weekly fellowship luncheon is going to start after floor, so if you'd like to attend, room 454, but grab your lunch and we'll see you there, and we'll be out by 12:55. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further announcements? Remonstrances. Representative Alonzo Leon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, we have all heard that women on average earn only 80% of what men earn, meaning that women on average have just today caught up with the earnings of men from last year. And I shared with all of you last week that for Latina women, this falls to 54%. But I think in all of the talk around average earnings and percentages, we forget what this means for the women and families in our districts. So I wanted to share some context. According to the National Partnership for Women and Families, the wage gap means that Latinas earn $26,000 less every year, which translates to 3 years of child care, or 3 years of tuition at a public university, or the full cost of tuition at a 2-year community college, or 193 weeks, that's equals to 3.7 years of food for her family, or 17 months of mortgage and utility payments, or more than 27 months of rent. So when we're talking about the wage gap, we are talking about working mothers who are taking care of their families with less. I urge us all to remember this as we recognize Equal Pay Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. For the remonstrances. Adjournment. Representative Barnhart, 10:45 a.m., Wednesday, April 5th, 2017.
Madam Speaker, I move the House adjourn until 10:45 a.m., Wednesday, April 5th, 2017.
Representative Barnhart moves the House adjourn until 10:45 a.m., Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. Without objection, the House is adjourned.